This video's gonna contain spoilers of the most recent episode of Paradise, so I'm warning you now. Episode 4 of Paradise is here, and I'm genuinely hooked on the show. It's got everything that made This Is Us so emotionally engaging, but it's got the sci-fi, secrecy, and mystery embedded within its core that you get in the likes of Silo. It's just great, and this episode was no different. In fact, I previously thought the ending of episode 2 contained the best moment within the show so far, but I feel the ending of this episode takes it. Poor Billy, man. This episode was titled Agent Billy Pace, and it was rightfully titled that because we took a look back at the troubled life and backstory of the complex yet interesting character that had suspicions thrown his way. Unlike everybody else down there, Billy wasn't mourning the loss of anybody. In fact, being located down in the cave was the moment that he actually started to live, so it provided the polar opposite experience to everybody else. With the biggest MF being right in front of him this whole time and sharing the same bed, the ending of episode 4 was just so goddamn sad. So with that, let's dive into the episode, recap, break it down, and discuss all things Paradise episode 4. The ending explained. This episode was all about making us suspicious of Billy, and then turning it on its head right at the end, especially after witnessing his past. We saw that on the outside, he killed his uncle, got into trouble whilst in jail, and then became a highly trained killing machine, something which immediately made us think that he could have been behind the death of the president. Then, when you pair that with the fact that he stopped the video footage and also was the polar opposite to the likes of Xavier in the fact that he'd drink on the job, he'd speak his mind to the president, which could have been viewed as being disrespectful, and was also engaging in a relationship with another agent in secret, it made him feel like he could well have been behind it. This shot in particular summed it up well because through the bar there was a clear divide between both Xavier and Billy, something that I thought was a nice touch. There was a point that was made in this episode where Billy's life on the outside was something that he didn't mourn. There was a sense of misery amongst the population that was in the cave several months after going down there, and it was because nobody truly knew what the outside was like, if there was any life and if there were any survivors. As both Billy and Xavier said, it's the not knowing which was behind the sense of misery and unsettling. This was something that Billy didn't care about because he didn't actually have that good of a life on the outside. He didn't have a family, he was a killer, and he regretted the life that he found himself in. It was through going down into the cave where he felt like he could actually start his new life and put the killing behind him. Hence why there was such a heavy focus on him becoming friends with Xavier, him meeting his family, acting goofy when doing so, and the importance that they held in his life. He was a new man down there, and he actually had a life, which was also supported when he said to Xavier that his kids were the most important people to him. Billy finally had a sense of normality in his life, and it only took the world ending for that to be possible. However, as we saw, Billy did end up becoming a killer again whilst he was in the cave. During this episode, there was this flashback that Billy kept having to this deer, and we believe that it was from his time on the outside before the disaster. But in reality, we saw that it was 5 months after they were sent down into the cave. Billy was tasked with killing the 4 explorers that were sent up to the surface to see what kind of state the world was in. This was following President Bradford taking Billy and Xavier's concerns on board. He thought that the mood would be settled in the cave if people had some kind of understanding of what was going on the outside. However, Sinatra, who we know is actually the most powerful person down there, got him to kill the explorers. This was because she wanted people to live in fear and not be able to go back outside even though we saw that the air was breathable, there were signs of life, and they could build a new life out there. This ultimately comes down to Sinatra being somebody who wants power and control, and the fact that she has 25,000 people in her cave. She's essentially in charge of her own mini-world, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it. That's why I originally thought that she was called Sinatra, because she always got things her way. Billy was struggling to live with the fact that his life was sent into a state of regression after killing the wife of the bartender that he'd probably consider a friend, and also the fact that Sinatra was going to be after the only person in his life that mattered to him, Xavier. So he threatened her and said that if she was going to try and kill him, she'd have to send the biggest guy that she had. But it turned out that it was Jane that was the other killer that was brought down into the cave, and she did end up killing him. He was going to tell Xavier what he was tasked to do by Sinatra, and he did plant the seed in saying that Sinatra was a cold-blooded killer. So Xavier will probably look to take her down even more now. What I thought was poetic though was the fact that he did end up dying as Uncle Billy, and not the person who he was on the outside, because it wasn't brought to the surface of the conversation. The sparkle losing its flame as Billy said goodbye to Xavier definitely made me feel like his death was on the horizon, and I thought it was such a sad moment. The fact that Jane was in on it all showed that there are so many different layers to what Sinatra has in her hands, and the power that she holds is quite literally immense. At first, I felt like this world was built so that she can ensure the safety of her daughter following the loss of her son. But now, it's very much looking like she wants to be in total control and to be able to have the people living in fear whilst not knowing what's on the outside, because she'd lose the very thing that she's enjoyed having a taste of. Seeing the entirety of Billy's life being shown to us in this episode, from being neglected as a child by his uncle, to becoming a killer, to finding a family in Xavier, to becoming an uncle that he probably would have liked to have had, to then being turned into a killer again, and then meeting his end. It was just so powerful, and it was a really emotional watch. I'm gutted he's gone, because he was a character that I liked a lot. We saw how hurt Xavier was when he thought that he killed the president, so now that he's dead, I feel it could break him. He's lost his wife, the president, and now his brother and best friend, Xavier. With Billy's last words to him being, Sinatra is a cold-blooded killer, he's definitely going to be going after her now. Every Rose Has Its Thorns being the song that was played at the carnival by Cal's son, and it also being the song that played over Billy's death, was something that perfectly summed up the character of Billy. He was a rose in the sense that he was a deeply caring, soft individual to those that he cared about, something which we saw being most prominent with Xavier and his children. But he had his thorns too, which was his past that he tried to leave on the outside. It was the perfect song choice for him for sure. The scene in the airport. One scene that really stood out to me was when Billy first met Xavier and the family when they were in the security section before entering the cave. This came as a flashback to Xavier. What I found particularly interesting in this was the capturing of the mood and tone that was there. We heard gunshots going off, there was an all-round sense of panic that was present. We saw Xavier mention that his wife didn't make it onto the plane, so she was deleted from the system. Plus, we also saw that there was blood on Agent Robinson's shirt when she said how her job was to provide stability. In the previous episode, hearing about how Xavier always looked for exits in buildings within seconds of walking into them, and how he always saw the bad in the world rather than the good, the chaotic nature and panic that was present in the hangar showed that his mind would have pretty much been in turmoil. I feel like it captured his mindset perfectly, and the lack of being able to do anything about it. I also feel like seeing the blood on Agent Robinson's shirt showed that they were probably doing things, including killing people, to ensure the survival of the 20,000 people that were being placed in there. I actually think we'll probably get an episode on her. It wouldn't surprise me. Flashbacks seem to be really key in this show. We've seen it with Billy, Sinatra, and moments with Xavier across different parts of his life. So I feel we'll see an entire section dedicated to this airport hangar scene. My review of the episode. This was such a good episode of the show. In fact, this entire show is one that I'm just absolutely loving. Not only is the mystery and the questions around who killed the president something that's engaging, but what Dan Fogelman brought to us with This Is Us has been planted in this show as well. Deep human connections and the ability to empathize and sympathize and feel like we truly know the characters. He's phenomenal when it comes to that, and I don't think there's any better in the game than him for that specific thing. John Beavers as Agent Billy Pace was just exceptional. I felt so heavily connected to him, and the passion and love that he had for Xavier and his family was just a joy to watch on screen. I was gutted when he died because he was one of the more interesting characters in the show. Seeing what loss did to the people was something that was made apparent in this episode. We saw it with Xavier, we saw it with the overall mood and feeling of the city in the early days, and also the bartender after his wife didn't return. There's definitely some kind of conspiracy going on with Sinatra with her plan to keep the people inside, so I'm intrigued to see if she had a hand in being behind the president being killed. Personally, I don't think she did. I think she cared a lot for him, so she wouldn't have done it. One other thing that I love in this show too is the score. Fogelman used the same composer that he used in This Is Us, and you can definitely tell. There are some motifs that are extremely similar, but it's got enough of its own identity to be able to become synonymous with this show. Paradise is definitely a show that I'm hooked on, and I can't wait to see what happens next week. So, there you have it, Paradise Episode 4 Ending Explained.